10. The Cocoliztli epidemic. In 1545, a mysterious fever devastated indigenous Mexico. Unlike smallpox, this disease presented with bleeding eyes and dark urine. Aztec records describe it as a great pestilence of unknown origin. Researchers like Rodolfo Acuña Soto suggest it was a viral hemorrhagic fever. It hit regions untouched by European contact at the time. Entire populations vanished before they could reach their kin. Modern DNA studies from the Tepescalula Yucunda site identified Salmonella enterica. However, the ferocity of the symptoms remains highly debated by experts. It killed up to 15 million people in 2 years. Colonization efforts were aided by this demographic collapse. Without the indigenous labor force, the society buckled instantly. Forests reclaimed the farmland within a single generation. This disaster effectively ended the era of traditional Mesoamerican autonomy. It remains one of the deadliest events in human history. The pathogen may have been an indigenous strain fueled by drought. Today, it stands as a grim reminder of biological vulnerability. We still argue about its exact mechanism and transmission. 9. The Plague of Amwas. In 639 CE, shortly after the conquest of Syria, a plague struck the Muslim armies. Named after the village of Amwas, it claimed the lives of key generals. Figures like Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah succumbed to the illness. The mortality rate was staggering, wiping out entire military companies. Soldiers died in their sleep without a mark on their bodies. Contemporary chroniclers describe it as a divine test for the new caliphate. It delayed the expansion of Islamic forces into North Africa. Scholars estimate that 25,000 soldiers perished in a matter of weeks. The event forced a radical reorganization of the regional military command. It is cited in historical accounts as the Year of Ashes. No war or famine could explain the sudden speed of the deaths. It caused a massive exodus of refugees moving toward the Hijaz. Scientists believe it was likely a particularly aggressive Yersinia pestis variant. Yet the lack of recorded cases later makes it a historical anomaly. It exists today as a silent footnote in the annals of early empire building. The strategic consequences lasted for decades, altering the destiny of the Levant. 8. The Plague of Justinian. Starting in 541 CE, the Byzantine Empire faced a catastrophic pandemic. It began in the port city of Pelusium, Egypt. Trade ships carried the infection into the heart of the empire. Emperor Justinian I was one of the few who survived. At its height, the capital lost nearly 10,000 citizens every single day. Historian Procopius documented the horror of bodies piling up in the streets. The plague hit the city with such intensity that proper burials became impossible. Historians believe up to 50 million people may have died across the empire. It halted the Roman reconquest of the Western Mediterranean. The plague was a primary factor in the eventual decline of the Byzantine Golden Age. It shifted the religious and social mindset of the entire medieval world. People viewed it as a divine judgment fueling intense spiritual movements. Excavations in modern Turkey have revealed mass graves from this period. DNA evidence confirms the culprit was the bubonic plague. This event proved that a single pathogen could dismantle a superpower. It serves as a study in how pandemics dictate the flow of imperial history. The third plague pandemic, emerging in Yunnan, China during the 1850s, this outbreak traveled globally. It reached the bustling port of Hong Kong by 1894. This was the era of the third wave, impacting every continent. It was the first time scientists could study the plague with modern microscopes. Alexandre Yersin identified the causative bacterium, Yersinia pestis, in Hong Kong. This discovery forever changed our understanding of epidemiology. The plague spread rapidly through rat populations on steamships. It arrived in cities like San Francisco, Sydney, and Buenos Aires. Unlike medieval outbreaks, this one was tracked via international data exchange. Public health measures, like sanitation and quarantine, were finally implemented. Despite medical advancements, millions still perished globally, particularly in India. It demonstrated how rapid transit can fuel the spread of contagion. The world learned that global trade requires global health vigilance. The pandemic eventually receded in the early 20th century. However, it remains endemic in small pockets of the world today. It represents the bridge between ancient pestilence and modern medicine. 6. The Antonine Plague. In 165 CE, Roman soldiers returning from the Parthian War brought a lethal disease home. The Antonine Plague, likely caused by smallpox or measles, spread across the empire. It decimated the Roman army, causing a massive loss of manpower. Even the co-emperor, Lucius Verus, died from the illness. Rome lost roughly 2,000 people a day at the peak of the outbreak. Galen, the famous physician, described the clinical symptoms with precision. Skin eruptions, fever, and digestive issues were common manifestations. The epidemic destabilized the borders as tribes sensed Roman military weakness. It forced the empire to recruit farmers and barbarians to fill gaps. The social order cracked, leading to inflation and economic slowdown. Many Romans turned to cults or new religions as hope vanished. This event is cited by historians as the beginning of Rome's long decline. The plague effectively weakened the grip of the Pax Romana. It serves as a stark example of how war and disease intersect. Millions died, yet the empire limped forward for 2 more centuries, the Plague of Athens. During the Peloponnesian War in 430 BCE, Athens was besieged by Sparta. Suddenly, a mysterious, fast-moving illness engulfed the city. Citizens were packed behind the city walls, creating perfect conditions for spread. Thucydides, the historian, fell ill, but survived to write a harrowing account. Symptoms included extreme heat, internal burning, and a desperate thirst. Many victims threw themselves into wells, seeking cold relief from their fever. The death toll was so high that bodies were left unburied in temples. It claimed the life of Pericles, the influential Athenian statesman. This epidemic is widely credited with shifting the balance of power toward Sparta. The loss of leadership and morale doomed Athens to eventual defeat. No modern medical classification fits the symptoms perfectly. Some believe it was typhus, while others suspect Ebola or a viral hemorrhagic fever. The plague broke the spirit of one of history's greatest civilizations. It left a lasting trauma on the Athenian population and political structure. Athens never truly regained its status as the dominant naval power. It remains an example of how pandemics can decide the outcomes of wars. The Black Death. In 1347, 12 ships docked in Sicily, carrying a silent, lethal cargo. The bubonic plague decimated medieval Europe in just a few years. It was so fast that people would go to sleep healthy and die by dawn. Swollen black lymph nodes, or buboes, gave the disease its terrifying name. It wiped out nearly half of the continent's total population. Graveyards overflowed, forcing cities to dig massive pits for the victims. The labor shortage caused by the plague effectively ended the feudal system. Peasants could suddenly demand better wages, altering the entire economic landscape. Medical science at the time was helpless, relying on bleeding and incense. Doctors often wore bird-like masks filled with herbs, believing in miasma. The psychological impact was immense, fostering deep religious fatalism. Death became a common subject in art, leading to the dance macabre. Despite the tragedy, the survivors eventually sparked the early Renaissance. We now know it was caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. History changed forever because of this single, devastating microscopic organism. 3. The 1918 Influenza pandemic. In the final months of World War I, a new strain of influenza emerged. It didn't discriminate between the young or old, targeting healthy individuals. Millions of soldiers in the trenches became the first casualties. The movement of troops ensured the virus traveled to every corner of the earth. In cities like Philadelphia, crowded parades worsened the spread of the virus. Hospitals were overwhelmed, forcing people to be treated in makeshift tents. Doctors were powerless as there were no antibiotics for secondary infections. Global estimates suggest up to 50 million people lost their lives. It decimated some indigenous communities almost entirely in a few weeks. The pandemic vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving the world in shock. It changed public health forever, leading to the rise of socialized medicine. Many countries implemented national health systems to prevent future catastrophes. Despite the carnage, the 1918 flu is often remembered as the forgotten pandemic. Recent research suggests it might have originated in birds or mammals. It serves as a reminder of our vulnerability to respiratory viruses. We continue to study its genetic profile to prepare for future threats. 2. The cholera pandemics. Starting in the 1820s, cholera became the Blue Death of the Industrial Age. It originated in the Ganges Delta before traveling along global trade routes. The disease thrives in contaminated water, causing rapid and severe dehydration. Cities were rapidly industrializing without proper waste disposal, turning water sources into vectors. People suffered from intense cramps and fluid loss, often dying within hours. In London, John Snow discovered the link between cholera and a water pump. He removed the handle, effectively ending the local outbreak and sparking epidemiology. However, globally, several waves of cholera killed millions throughout the 19th century. It forced massive investments in urban water and sewage systems. The development of modern public health infrastructure was born from this struggle. Scientists eventually identified the bacteria Vibrio cholerae in the late 1800s. Despite our ability to treat it, Cholera remains a threat in areas without safe water. It demonstrated the vital importance of clean sanitation in the modern world. Every time you turn on a faucet, you are benefiting from the lessons learned from cholera. 1. The smallpox pandemic. Smallpox is the only disease in history to have been completely eradicated by humans. For millennia, it ravaged populations, leaving survivors scarred and blinded. Its origins are ancient, with traces found on Egyptian mummies. The virus was highly contagious, spreading through droplets and contaminated objects. It shaped global demographics, particularly during the European colonization of the Americas. Indigenous societies were decimated, lacking any natural immunity to the virus. Edward Jenner's development of the vaccine in 1796 was a pivotal moment. He discovered that cowpox provided immunity, sparking the foundation of modern immunology. Global vaccination campaigns in the 20th century were unprecedented in their scale. The WHO spearheaded a massive push to reach every village across the globe. In 1980, the World Health Organization officially declared smallpox eradicated. This is the greatest achievement in the history of public health. It proved that humanity can defeat the most formidable biological enemies. The remaining samples are kept under tight security in 2 global repositories. We now look toward eradicating other diseases using the same blueprints. Smallpox remains our most powerful example of the victory of science over nature.